So about everything in order. I can only say about myself that I am a first-year student at a provincial university, however, quite prestigious in our places near Moscow. Myself, although there are several proven friends, I spend more time either alone or with my home. I will sketch out a small plan of our town near Moscow. The administration, White House, the police, the hospital, schools, and so on. Everything. As always, there is still an old madhouse, closed under Tsar-P, dilapidated and forgotten, standing in a once picturesque place, which is now overgrown with barrion, bushes, and small trees. Actually, we will talk about him. I'm starting a story, although I am a rather insular person. A society of 2 to 3 people will not hurt me, especially friends, and especially if you confuse something interesting with them. I lived in this city not so long ago, so while I got only 3 good friends, I avoided others. Of these 3, 2 were visitors, Vasya and Sergei, and 1 native, Anton. Once, when the blizzard stopped, we cooperated to climb into some abandoned house and hold small gatherings there, such as the winter ones. We chose this most abandoned psychiatric hospital as an abandoned house, although there was also a burnt house as an option, but there was no roof there. In the afternoon, we got on foot along the snowdrifts to this building. The idea of coming at night was expressed, but was not taken seriously, with difficulty pushing back the falling snow with the door. We squeezed inside. It was terribly dark in the corridor. One of us cut in a lantern. Everyone had this. We looked around. Everything, like in ordinary abandoned buildings. Fragments of boards on the floor, a smoking stand on the wall, broken hinge lamps on the dirty ceiling that smeared in places. My friends were not there for the first time, but I got here for the first time. We moved to the door to the corridor, where a strip of light was visible. 4 of us went out into a rather light hall from the snow outside the windows, quite extensive. In front of the registry with the broken window were the peeled beams, so that you can better imagine this place. I advise you to remember the local hospital and age it for 20 years. Had tons of people who drank during this time on the ground floor. And look at the resulting picture. The site could be called the monument of abandonment. We cut down the lantern and went out into the center of the room. On the sides of the reception, there were passages to the corridors. There were once doors on them. The reception was empty and gouged. Even the table was broken. "Let's go," said one of us, and we divided into 2 groups, 2 and 2. Moved to the corridors, me and Vasya. To the left, Gray and Anton. To the right, walking slowly along the corridor. We occasionally pushed the doors with our feet, including the lantern and illuminating the next room. Maybe who knows what an adrenaline feeling it is to feel that. You are alone in a large 3-story building that no one needs, and you can do whatever you want. What happened here? I asked my lagging companion. Yes, there was a psychiatric hospital, only here they muddled something strange, like experiments on people. I had already prepared to listen to the story, as this jerk slapped me sharply on the shoulder and screamed. I made it and almost gave him a lantern over the head. He ran back and, laughing, said, "Yes, the hell knows him, they kept the psychos." Then the house was closed. In the archives, dear up. They are on the 3rd, only they are unlikely to get away. There is no ladder. I said I'd move on. He nodded, and we went our separate ways. I caught a glimpse into some rooms. Somewhere there were tables, somewhere they were gods. Somewhere in the offices there was snow because of broken windows. The linoleum on the floor was torn and covered in holes. I went up to the second floor. Apparently, these were wards for ordinary patients, for doctors and service personnel. There were many large, spacious rooms for several people. In some there were even iron beds. I went into one such room. It was comparatively clean. With a metal chair next to the wall, I went up to the window. They were all whole, and behind the glass in the snow, I saw the tracks that were stuck from the hospital wall into the forest. Where did the guys go? I flashed in my thoughts. I was even surprised, but out of reflection I was afraid. A shadow flashed on the wall and stopped. Someone stood in the opening and began to sneak. By a characteristic head swinging, I recognized Vasya. The reflection in the window convinced me it was him. I went to hell, I barked, turning sharply. The guy dropped the lantern from fright and, tripping over the board, collapsed to the floor. "Ah, fool," he shouted, choked, and then I began to laugh. I helped him up, and we began to discuss the option of holding a party here. The wind did not blow. It was even warm, more booze, something for warming like kerosene, and then we'll see. Yes, well, some kind of bullshit, said a friend. In spring or summer it would be muddy. No, you have to go to nature in the summer, I said. We'll see, Vasya said, and we moved on. Here, let me show you, he said. As we walked past two entire doors, he pushed one of them, and she creaked into the stairwell. On the right there was a simple stone staircase, carving down. On the left, nothing, just emptiness. And that's on all the stairs, Vasya said, so that people do not break their heads. These doors were left here, and then drunk rod and so. And what, no one climbed? Yes, they climbed in. One climbed in. Then said that he saw shadows in the corridor, then saw people from the archive. They asked him for help. He moved and killed the whole family. Vasya began to invent. I slapped him on the shoulder. After all, you are a noble inventor. He laughed and said that he would put me down if I was so impatient there. I agreed. There was an archive, and some hospital sheets of a psychiatric hospital can be as frightening as horror films. Typing and laying together bricks lying around, boards and other trash. I tried to jump to the stairwell, and when I succeeded with my growth, I climbed up with the help of a friend. There were no doors. It was very light in the corridor in front of me. I stepped forward and looked around. Light corridors. On the sides, many iron doors with tops. Everyone was locked. The tops were closed. Here, apparently, at one time they kept violent patients. I went further and went into another corridor. Shorter, the building was U-shaped. There were more or less preserved offices, some even closed. Came across with normal doors. It was cleaner on the floor. It was immediately clear that school children and alcoholics almost did not get here. I went further. My eyes were presented with a long corridor with a small number of doors. I accelerated my step and moved forward. When I came to the door, I pushed it and hit the library. Half of the cabinets were lying on the floor. There were few books. Apparently, for so long they still climbed here, the windows were intact. It was light. I noticed the switch clicked. It is clear that the light did not turn on. I walked further noticed a heavy wooden door, pushed it with my foot. She didn't give in, and I almost fell from that surprise. I hit the trash door again and again until I finally knocked it out and got into a room with a lot of racks, cabinets, and tables. There were cardboard boxes on each shelf, some packed, some open. They showed papers, some of which were scattered on the floor. I walked between the racks and moved the first packed box to myself. She was heavy enough, and I decided to take her to the table so as not to mess around in a tight space. I was already bringing it to the table, like something seemed to pull the box, and there was a terrible crash. The bottom of the box was smashed and collapsed, and the cassettes that were in the box collapsed to the floor. Wildly rumbling, I got scared, but quickly picked myself up. Having discarded the already empty box, I leaned over the contents. Simple cassettes, already outdated for a long time, large, black, with faded marks, where with a pencil, where with a pen. On the side there were numbers, then a fractional sign and more numbers. Obviously, these were videos for some medical histories. I took 3 pieces and put my jackets in my pockets. I hoped these tapes would deliver quite a few interesting minutes. I also grabbed a couple of rather voluminous folders, barely sticking them into the inner pockets of the jacket. I again dropped in front of a bunch of tapes and began to think about what to do with them. I pushed the pile under the table, and at that moment I noticed a flickering shadow that ran through the doorway. I saw it on the opposite side of the opening. Turning my head sharply there, I crumbled a lot. The thought flashed in my head that it was again Vasya, that it was a watchman, although he was not born here or some kind of dog. I jumped to my feet with fright when my cell phone rang. Anton called. "That you're crawling there, come on down," his voice rang. "I'll come soon," I reply, adding, "I'll break a little into this jerk." "What?" "Yes, Vaska, tired of him sneaking up." They were silent at that end, and after a pause, Anton said, "The 3 of us are here, Vasya," and Seryoga's voices confirmed this. I was surprised and scared in earnest. Behind the door outside along the wall, anyone could lurk and wait for me. I looked around. In addition to the front door, there was another open and closed with a curtain. I rushed to the exit, and when I ran down the corridor, I dropped one of the folders, running into the stairwell. I was frightened again when I realized that I could collapse from a simple height. The stairs were not there. I quickly went down in my arms, jumped to the 2nd floor, and saw some people in front of me scream, but then recognized Anton, Gray, and Vasya. "To you," all 3 shouted hoarse. "There was someone there," I said. All 3 shrugged. Vasya said that he also saw someone with a scythe on his shoulders and in a black canopy, and we laughed together. I did not tell them about the tapes, and when we walked along the road, we discussed the party. Anton and Seryoga walked on another wing and said that everything was bad there. I told them about the 3rd, Vasya, about the 2nd. "Oh well," we decided, "bad idea. Maybe it will be warmer on the 2nd and it will be possible, but not now." And the wind rose into the truth. The snow began revenge with renewed vigor. "Where else did you go?" I asked Anton. "I mean, well, the tracks were fresh from the wall into the forest." All 3 looked at me and I looked at them. "We didn't go anywhere. only wandered in a psychiatric hospital. I told them about the tracks, and we decided that it was someone else wandering. When I came home, I found that all the pets had left for relatives in another city, and they would not be there for several days. It was on my hands in this case. I would not hurt to see what is on the tapes. I had dinner, took out the good old cassette player from the mezzanine, connected it to the TV. He dumped the folders and put the tapes on the table. I waited for the VCR to start and put a cassette in it. The device swallowed it, and stripes froze on the screen. When the ripples passed, a woman in white clothes appeared on the screen. Sitting on a metal chair like what I saw in the hospital, she held her hands on the table. Cuts were visible in her arms. The video was black and white. In places it was very rippling. The sound was just disgusting. Apparently, the film became demagnetized, lying in a box. I connected the VCR to the TV tuner of the computer and overtook the record in memory. It was already dark when I finished shamanizing with filters, color, various programs for restoring old video materials. But the output turned out to be a rather bad, but still watchable video of the dialogue with the patient. She was young, judging by the face, and conducted a dialogue with the doctor, who wrote it all down. Through the interference in the sound, you could hear the conversation. "What is your name?" Angelina then went, "Interference, Andreevna." "What worries you so much?" "I am haunted." Then there was interference again. During the conversation, the girl sat flat, looking at one point, while combing her hands. "Who's after you?" "My dead sister." The hindrances began to interrupt the whimpering. Ripples ran through the image, but it was possible to see that Angelina began to wring her hands. "How's she going after you?" "She comes to my ward." The sound got better, although ripples were still slipping on the screen. "Why is she doing this?" "Does, I guess, since the interference began again. She's it." The girl held out in a trembling voice and looked up for the first time. I was a little scared. My eyes were exhausted with a dark vascular mesh. For what? The voice of the doctor was clearly heard. "I didn't save her." The girl drooped, and her shoulders pulled. Such a dialogue of simple phrases lasted several minutes. The video quality became much better, and it was already possible to see the recording date, the 89th year. From the conversations, it became clear that the girl's sister crashed in an accident, and now it seems to her that her spirit haunts her. However, then I was already scared. "Tell me, where did you get the cuts on your arms, back, and legs?" the doctor asked warmly. "This is her," the girl said with a crying whisper. "Did she come to you at night?" "Yes, and she started cutting me." "Please don't take me to the 3rd floor. Leave me on the 2nd with people. I don't want to go it alone." "Okay, you'll be on the 2nd. But you have to promise that the cuts will stop." "I'll try, just don't leave me there alone." Angelina prayed. "All right, go, take it out," he told someone. And the girl was taken out by another woman, apparently a nurse. Severe form of depression, personality bifurcation, outbreaks of autoaggression, paranoia. The doctor began to list. Apparently, for recording, he called a few more wise mental illnesses, called the date and surname of the patient, Churin, and it reminded me of someone. Yes, I've definitely heard that last name before. I inserted the next cassette into the VCR, ran the script, dropped the recording on the flash drive without stopping playback, While the video was being copied, I opened one of the cases. Someone Vasily with a strange surname, at the time when he turned 18 years old, began to believe that his parents and sister are demons. The diagnosis is chronic paranoid schizophrenia. The voices of the angels called on him one night to take his grandfather's gun, charge it, and shoot all his household. He was arrested and sent to a psychiatric hospital. He lived in Semyubichi in the Tver region. It is not clear how he ended up in the Moscow region. Apparently, he was sent for treatment. The case was also accompanied by a photo, black and white, of course. The guy is like a guy, only the eyes are stuck. I was distracted from reading by the movement on the monitor. The video was still playing. On it, some silhouette shouted silently, gave signs to the camera, which was installed apparently through the door. I was frightened from surprise, but I was overwhelmed by real horror when a girl, she was with long hair, began to cut her hands with a kind of sharp object, scratch and wriggle in the most incredible poses, trying to prick herself as hard as possible while defending against something. Then the camera shook and she began to shoot how doctors, orderlies run inside and bind the girl, give her an injection, and she falls asleep. The image disappears. To say I was scared is an understatement. I rushed to roll up the video. Yes, it was a fierce horror. I set out to show the video to friends, finished the remnants, and saw that the second video was ready. I turned it on too, having prepared to pair it beforehand. A familiar wall with a calendar and a poster depicting the brain appeared on the video. The quality of this video was much better. Another girl was sitting at the table, apparently with blonde hair, and answered questions from the same voice, while continuously swinging from side to side and biting her lip. Anna, sometimes my hands light up. That's what worries me. When does that happen? Only when I fall asleep, and that's why you don't sleep. How exactly do they burn? Both bombs at once. It is very painful, Ivan Stepanovich, but on hands you have no burns, and we can guarantee that your hands won't light up just like that. You have to sleep, understand? 2 weeks without dream. It are already serious. Suddenly the girl began to panic. No, I can't. You never tested it, therefore so speak. Such conversation continued several minutes. On each question she had a crazy answer. At last the doctor told, "Well, I will write out to you tablets now, and it will be possible to translate you to ordinary patients, not sleeping pill." Quickly, and with a fright, Tana spoke. "No, simply calming." The girl nodded and thought. I took a closer look. Yes, eyes at her were closed. Rustling of a pencil stopped. The intense silence hung. "Anna." Loudly the doctor called. That, as if on command, raised the head and, having immediately looked down on a palm, loudly began to yell. I moved from this awful cry and cut down loudspeakers. When I looked at the monitor again, saw how half-conscious Anna rushes up and down an office, swinging hands, and, apparently, shouting. The doctor jumped. In a moment hospital attendants came running, took away the escaping girl. The person passed in a white dressing gown to a table and sat down at him. I turned on the loudspeaker. The voice was distributed, this time on hands of the patient. Burns of the first degree. Developed, perhaps, suggestion. He began to list diseases again, and I scrolled record far away, having got for some moment. I got a fright and nearly shouted. The camera removed the body hanging in a loop. There were no doubts that it is Anna. Further on record, it was visible how the body was put on a couch. The camera, by the way, removed an iron door with a top, and the ripples came after that. I switched off the player and, having turned on the music, began to thumb through the second folder with a personal record of the patient. There the case of splitting of the personality was described, and for each personality one more small case was opened. I began to read. There it was written about the woman who under certain circumstances was the humblest girl. At others, quietly I worked as the prostitute, having got myself the certain apartment. The dog into whom she turned when got to the basement of the house was her third alter ego. In her case, everything ended rather well. She recovered. It turned out all this was in detail described in a personal record that when she was 5 years old, her mother often locked her in the basement of the house for several days, and the elder brother demanded from her satisfaction of his usual requirements in exchange on food. In a year, neighbors learned about it and took away the girl. When she became adult, these cases completely were effaced from her memory. On the last turn, the leaf with two numbers divided by the fractional sign was pasted. The same leaves, but with different numbers, were also in another matters. I understood that it is numbers of cartridges, and decided to descend behind them tomorrow. Having decided that for today it is enough, I went to bed. Next morning, first of all, I dumped records on the USB stick and called Vassia with the offer to go again to mental hospital behind modern histories, about which I at once told him. He by a sleepy voice rejected this invention and told that he will just look at records, but won't go, and Anton with Gray will hardly go, he told, warning I call him. Why, yes, I think so. I called also them. They really refused to go. Though there was a day I decided to go one, took a lamp, just in case a knife, and when took him, remembered a shadow which ran then. It became terrible, and to a knife I added a bat, having hidden it under a jacket. It was small, but heavy, with a lead core. I locked the apartment and went to hospital. There was already a lunch when I reached her and entered inside. Same hall, same registry. I passed in the left corridor, walked to a ladder and rose by the second floor, only having been going to step for a ladder on the third. I was frightened and remembered that there is no ladder, and it is necessary or to stamp home for hinged, or to think what to do. I began to think to go home about a kilometer. Won't go. It is necessary to look for something. I dragged from the first floor pieces of 10 bricks and the stand from a tree, put bricks at each other in length, put on them the stand. There was an excellent chance to fall, but I was carried by, and I grasped the edge of a staircase. Further, I was brought up on hands and got on it. I took out my bat and went out into the already familiar bright corridor. Everything was like then. Flakes of snow flashed outside the window. The window itself was smeared and dirty. I went to the archive, holding my bat at the ready, and pushed the door. She opened with a creak, and I looked at the already familiar room. There were still cassettes near the table. All the boxes were in place. No one seemed to be in this place after me. I went into the room. Nobody. I looked at the opaque green curtain that closed the passage. Also no movement. but the curtain scared me wildly again. Why is it hanging here? Because in so much time it would either have been torn off or it would have burst itself. So someone hung her here, I shouted. Hey, if there is anyone here, come out, I will do you nothing wrong. In response, silence. I realized what an idiot I probably look like now, and leaned towards the tapes, choosing the right ones, and the necessary were those whose numbers were written in the affairs of patients. I found them by half-dead inscriptions with a pen and put them in a backpack, having previously thrown 3 more cassettes and 5 pieces of business there. I was about to leave when I looked at the opening, closed by a curtain. I came closer to her, horrified. After pulling it away, I saw a square room, completely empty, without any signs of a person, even after shining a lamp there. I did not see any door or hatch there, and where would he be there? I calmed down and went out. Again, it seemed to me that someone was waiting for me outside the doors, but there was no one there again. As I walked down the corridor, I suddenly stopped, feeling some kind of anxiety, which was growing. I turned around. There were no silhouettes in the bright window light. No one ran. Linoleum was clean. It was this purity that reminded me that when I ran away from here yesterday, I dropped one folder, and now it was not. I felt terrible, but I had a bat in my hands, and I decided to find out what was happening here. I walked from door to door of the left wing, pushing the doors, warehouse, archive, library. In the library on the table, a clean item attracted my attention. Everything around was covered with a layer of dust, and it stood out for its cleanliness. I went into the library and picked up the item. It was a flash drive, the most common USB flash drive, for 16 gigabytes. Apparently his whole. I had fun. Obviously, someone who climbed here before me forgot her, and now I can become the owner of several hours of pornography, a bunch of films or music, and just a good flash drive. I took her and went out, jumping from the stairwell to the second floor. I went downstairs and went outside. After breathing fresh air, I went home. At home, I dumped the contents of the backpack on the floor, separated the cases, and put them on the table, put the tapes in front of the VCR. In parallel with this, I began to search the internet for information about a local psychiatric hospital. There was little information, but I went to some site where it was described in detail. It was also written there that there is little information, because the hospital has not been used for a long time, and data about it is stored mainly in books and journals. However, it was still written that the hospital was hastily closed after some unpleasant incident that occurred there. The hospital was not simple. Something unusual was investigated there. Here I remembered how the girl spontaneously had burns on her palms. But then the studies were curtailed. Yes, 10. I muttered and inserted a flash drive into the computer. It was identified, the menu popped out, and I copied all the contents to the computer. The flash drive was packed almost to capacity. While the data was being copied, I went to the tapes. The first tape was a tape with a guy who killed his whole family. I instantly put it in the tape recorder and turned it on again. A disgusting quality. You can barely see the person wrapped in a straitjacket. Through the hindrances you can only hear his voice. You will have to copy this entry to your computer and process it. I went to the computer. The data has already been copied. and I decided to postpone this case for now. I looked into the folder with curiosity. About 100 video files, about 5 minutes long each. Wow. Broke out of me, and I launched the first video. A chair appeared on the screen, and a girl holding her hands on a table in front of her. She looked at one point and tore at something with her fingers. Cuts were clearly visible on the hands. Bandages were visible above the elbow. "What's your name?" From this voice I felt pressure in the abdomen. Yes, these were definitely the records that I saw, only here they were in excellent quality, albeit black and white. Angelina Pavlova Andreevna. I was surprised. Usually introduce themselves, putting the surname in the first place. "What worries you so much?" I pressed the space. Playback stopped. I freaked out terribly. Let's say someone before me collected all the records. Only after that, I noticed that the records had numbers of the same kind as on the cassettes, except for the last ones, edited them and improved them. And in one of the trips I forgot a flash drive on the 3rd floor. But why didn't you come? Maybe it was his shadow that flashed then. I began to think and decided that this thought was correct because there were no more options. I squandered the record to the end. In the end, I again found the scene where the girl beats against the walls. The deaf sound of blows is heard. She begins to cut and stab herself while defending herself from the attack of the spirit. I minimized the player and started the next recording. There was already a very young girl sitting at the table, almost a teenager, and in a pretentious manner, with active gesticulation and large eyes, singing. Said that people who help her constantly walk around her tell a lot of new things. "Tell me, who let you out of the cell?" the doctor asked. "Well, one of my friends released. I asked him. He released and helped me get out, and said where doctors go, and distracted them with knocks and shadow. And I left." She laughed. The doctor quickly wrote everything down, then asked, "Are there many? How often do you see them?" "I see a lot of them, very often. Now one tells me that you have forgotten your cigarettes at home." "Ah ha ha ha." The doctor gushed and ordered his assistant to take the girl away. When they got out, he moved the drawer back and said for a recording, "There is no cigarette." Apparently, I either dropped them or forgot at home. I stopped playing, judging by the number of records. They would be enough for I included the following entry. There again appeared a girl of about 25, short-cropped with dark hair. I looked at the date, the 90th year. Past ones were 89s, yeah, so the further, the later the recordings. I turned off the player and started recording somewhere 3/4 by the end. The recording turned out to be already color. A girl I already knew was sitting on a chair. Yes, this is the one that I saw people. Nah, she was just smiling, becoming an adult. "Tell me, what are people telling you now?" sounded an acquaintance, a little restless voice. "That it will be over soon." "What exactly?" "They'll let me out." "But you realize that as long as you hear them, we can't let you out." "I know." Such a conversation lasted for several minutes. I stopped the playback and went to the last recording. There was already great quality, rich color, good sound. A woman in her 40s was sitting at the table, but she looked good, who said with tears in her eyes, "Today they were again. I heard their steps." "Did they break for you?" "No, we just walked. I'm very scared." "Do you have strong doors?" "What if they came in?" the woman sobbed. "No, the doors are good. Don't worry." but you can cope with them yourself. Remember that demon that penetrated you one night. Did you beat him? Yes. So you will succeed this time too. Just be ready. Good. Then it was seen how the girl leaves the room. No one accompanies her. The doctor sits silent for a while, then gets up. The camera shakes and she approaches the door. Obviously, he forgot to turn it off. I began to look closely. Clean gray linoleum. The camera was tilted down and filmed it. Suddenly, the doctor apparently noticed that the camera was working and, lifting, turned it off. The playback ended, but I managed to notice in the last shot some bright spot on the floor of the hospital corridor. I threw the video into the program and watched the last second frame by frame. Here the camera quickly rises. Some object lying on the floor is lubricated in the distance. The next frame is clear, and I almost cried out. There was a folder on the floor that I dropped. When I ran away from there for the first time, I jumped up. Yes, it was definitely that folder. Even some papers fell out of it. Today the folder was not there, which means that the entry was made yesterday. Moving away from the shock, I sat down at the computer again and launched a video called 1/10. Again the same quality, the same office again. Again the girl at the table, but another. She tells the same doctor that there is someone under the skin of her face who, I don't know, perhaps worms. I feel how they creep. When do you feel it? When long I am one. All record there was this conversation. I switched to following. Then on the third, on the fourth I was frightened, having seen the face of this girl. Everything was torn apart, apparently, by nails, and the girl cried and complained that worms got her. I in fear switched further. Their scratches were already less. The girl was quiet. I jumped on the eighth record and hiccuped as the girl's face represented a bloody wound. Apparently wounds were given or a piece of iron, but anyway, her face was awful. I felt that I breathed falteringly and tears in front of my eyes acted. The following record: snow, the track trodden in snow. Conducting to the house, a sound of crispy snow of two pairs of legs. Record lasted 5 seconds. I in horror got up. The devilry occurring in this city went beyond all limits. Suddenly called the door. That forced me to experience cold on a back again. Having glanced in a peephole, I saw Vasya and opened for him a door. Having let in the apartment, he asked why I such pale, and I showed him consistently these 10 records. He saw them silently while I gave some tea in kitchen. When I came, he sat with protruding eyes, panting. What is? I asked. I know her. Say my neighbor. She went to Moscow a month ago. I became stupid from his words. Coal and militia, he shouted. But in the city there was no dress. Usually he was called for next, but because of weather to us hardly anyone would reach. Piled snow for the year ahead. What to do? He asked. Judging by his face, he didn't lie. And it really was his neighbor, grew dark and darkened. We called Anton and Seryoga that they came tearing along to us. We showed them these records. They in horror closed eyes when the girl tried to tell something the torn apart mouth, and only blinked the broken off eyelashes. The last video with the scared woman threw all 3 in shock. When I told them that the folder was let fall by me when I ran away from there, and today it wasn't there, we began to consult. The father Anton had a gun since the Great Patriotic War, and Anton promised to capture him. I took a bat. Vasya bore the camera. Gray just went for the company. We could wait till the morning or call more senior people, but we're afraid that we will just draw attention of that person who continued to be active in hospital. Therefore we on the quiet made the way in hospital. When in 15 minutes waited for Anton with a gun, we appeared in already familiar hall. All 4 included lamps, and looked round. Still the same. Vasya turned on the camera. It was visible badly, but the sound registered at least. We went along the corridor, walked upstairs on the 2nd floor, and stopped on a staircase. Minutes for 5:3 from us got on the 3rd floor, placing each other. Anton with a gun remained below. We left in a corridor. Here it was strange warm, despite winter. We quietly went on a floor, lighting a floor and walls. Vasya noticed several drops on a floor. We sat down on hunkers and began to consider them. Simple dark drops, dense, not frozen, gray color. We went further, same doors. I with fear knocked in one of them and applied an ear to a door. All held breath. Silence. We examined a door. On it there was neither lock nor a latch, as well as on it top, as though the door was filled up or locked from within. Strange. We solved. Suddenly strong light of a lamp was sideways switched on. We were frightened, as none of us had it. The lamp fell, and we saw the person in a shabby uniform of the security guard, middle-aged, small growth, tired. "What the hell you do here?" he asked, a question by a sleepy voice. Obviously, he slept recently, and his face was shown to me strange familiar. Also suspicious it seemed to me that he slept. When on an Uditsa was -10 degrees, and the building weren't heated. There is nothing to steal here, except unless these doors. He kicked an iron door. Yes, we just here play about. Vasya told. We want to research. And so send. I will tell you that here, yes, is that on coal to stick out, woke. You understand. Sorry, Vasya told, and we moved for the watchman. Everything, except me. I told that I will look for Anton, and went to other party, leaving. I heard a conversation of friends and the watchman, and how we will go down. There is no ladder in the same place. I put the usually you only for yes. I went down on hands on the 2nd floor and shouted, Anton. What reached from where from below, rise, we were revealed. Who? Local watchman. I heard Anton's steps, then saw a lamp. He rose upward. Having approached me, he told. What else, watchman? Here from his closing day wasn't. I was surprised, and suddenly me is pulled. I recognized the security guard. The person on record which I watch on the cartridge was quite badly visible, but I compared him to the photo. Yes, it was he. The same simple rural person, the same protruding eyes of the maniac who has gone crazy and shot all the family. From a falling piece of the grandfather, I flocked to the 2nd ladder, Anton. Preparing a gun for me, we went down on the 1st floor. It was silent. From where from below steps were heard, we turned to a ladder and began to shine with a lamp there. In light the security guard appeared, and, covering the face from light of lamps, asked Anton and his friend. We lowered lamps. The watchman took away a hand from a face. Yes, it was he. Were they? I asked. The watchman maliciously smiled and told. All the same, you will clean. Reptiles. He didn't manage to get a gun from a jacket. Anton shot to him at a leg, and he fell, having started turning as a spinning top, and ears peeped from a shot roar. We ran down a ladder for friends. We entered the dark basement, found a lamp-some subject in a corner covered with tarpaulin. It was the generator. I began to pull a rope while Anton stood sentinel, and at last the generator was started. Light spread on the room. It was the morgue, spacious, with stone arches, with a lot of dredging in walls and a huge wide iron door at the end. I approached the first dredging and pulled the handle. Something was rolled out like the shelf. Anton approached, too. On the shelf something lay, covered with a sheet. It was a body. In it there were no doubts. Outlines of the head, a trunk, hands. Further we didn't consider. I began to whirl the head. What here does a body? The hospital was closed 15 years ago. Anton slowly took a cover and sharply drew aside it. When he did it, I distracted a little, as it seemed to me that someone knocks another end of a morgue. But when I turned the head, I cried for horror. On the shelf, that girl with terribly torn apart person, open eyes and a mouth lay. But the most terrible was that she cut off legs completely. Anton stood in a stupor. I quickly pushed the shelf back and brought him round. It is necessary to find Vasya, and sir, my words turned to him, were interrupted with groan and knock another end. Anton heard them too, and we flocked there. In addition, lighting a way with lamps, we reached a fire chamber. Yes, it was the crematorium. A huge wide door and rivets, and such furnace it was possible to burn a bowl. We lifted a bolt and opened it. To huge worms from whom dust poured fell out of an open door. Something hissed. Worms began to move and began to cough. It were our friends who were sold in crematorium soul, and gas which pungent, irritating smell was felt also by us with. Anton hissed, having quickly locked a door and having lifted friends. We bring down, Vasya murmured, and we moved to an exit. We didn't begin to switch off the generator, and rose by the first floor. The security guard there wasn't any more. We terribly were frightened and saw that the trail blood conducts on the second floor. Vasya and Sergei dissuaded us there to go, but we all the same went upward for together. Friends told us that in our crematorium, except them, there was still some huge cauldron. By means of the lighter they could make out human bones there. Under this story we followed in the tracks. The trace conducted in the other wing, carefully going. We went along him. Our opponents knew this building better, and the most terrible was that we didn't know who it was and how many them. Perhaps it is one loony, or perhaps them hundreds here. The trace conducted to a staircase and upward on a lean-to ladder. We got on her on the third floor. It was terribly dark. Slowly lamps began to sit down. The trail brought us to the junction of the two wings of the building to the office with a normal door. We looked around. Nobody. We kicked the door. She had already begun to succumb, until Anton reminded us that the guard had a gun, which we forgot to take away from him. We stopped at indecision, moving sideways for the door. I turned my back to the door and left it with my foot, opening it with a bang. We stood like that for about a minute, hesitant to even look there. Finally, having agreed on the signs, we jumped into the office together, shining lanterns. There is no one there. The trail of blood passed into a puddle under a chair. Apparently, someone helped him, and this one was a doctor. Anton began to stand outside the door. While we fiddled in the clean office, I sat down at the table. Yes, it was the same cabinet that constantly appeared in the records. There was no doubt about it. There was a computer connected to an uninterruptible, apparently charged from a generator in the morgue. It reminded me of my last name, Trina. I asked Vasya and Gray if they knew that. They said they didn't. Anton, and you? I shouted. How he was walking. I opened the drawers in the table, and there was another flash drive and keys. Seryoga found a large camera in the closet. Some maniac, he said with feeling. What am I? Anton asked, looking into the room. Do you know Trina? Yeah, that's my mother's maiden name. What? I admit, was horrified by these words. Yes, I heard of her. What happened to her? She died in childbirth. Ah, yes. Everything converged. The recording was made in 1989, now 2011. Anton will turn 21 this year. He was in the army. From there in possession of a pistol. He is a native of this city. Yes, his mother was here. I took the keys and we left the office. It's completely dark, as if the world was flooded with black paint. We walked to the riot chambers. With difficulty I found a hole for the key, and with even greater difficulty I found the right key in the bundle. The lock clicked, the heavy door creaked. I ran to the side. You never know what could run out from there, but it was quiet. I looked in there. Nobody, toilet, couch, rag on the couch. Next to it is a metal table embedded in a wall, and nobody. We moved on to the next door. The nerves were at the limit, and Vasya said, maybe we'll come tomorrow. You never know what. Now it's dark, and this watchman is winding somewhere with a gun. We unanimously decided that this was a good thought, and quickly left the third floor. Taking the keys, quickly getting out of the hospital, we sank to me. When they came, they began to warm up with beer, partially purchased for the evening. Vasya and Gray separately went to the bathroom to wash away the corpse ashes, and I decided to show Anton a recording with his mother. Throughout he was intensely silent. When the replay ended, he said, Is that all? Yes. Where's her business? My aunt really crashed. Nightmare. Business? I don't know. In archive. Probably. I sympathize. When we gathered for together, I connected the USB stick to the computer. There were only 3 videos. However, they shed light a little on what happened in hospital. On the first video, it was removed, as someone does to the maniac sitting in a chair bandaging. Short video, 15 seconds. On the second, the same office was removed, as at inquiries of patients. Only instead of the patient there was a maniac. You have to clean them. They consider you silly. But you know a lot of things the doctors spread. I can't concern them. I need a gun or fire. I put a gun in your room. Don't train them, burn. Don't give them a chance to report about itself. Otherwise they will be hundreds. Remember that you made with demons of the family introduced to the world of light. About 5 minutes the doctor washed out a brain to the patient, until that got up and left. Horror. I commented on what was seen. Gray. But the real horror was on the third video. The doctor, apparently, was an operator and removed as the watchman would saws off from a dead body of the girl of a leg, one behind one, with an opposite deaf sound, as on a moldering board, and it is loud as a tree when it got on a bone, then put them on a floor nearby. Having completed it, he covered a corpse with a sheet and pushed the shelf, then took the axe and split each leg around a knee. Put all this to himself on hands as it firewood and moved to a crematorium. The operator followed him. In an open door of the furnace, there was a cauldron, huge, occupying about a half of the furnace. The watchman put stumps in a cauldron and was heard as they gurgle in water. Then the furnace was closed. Some switches and levers were turned, and from the furnace, in a crack between a door and a wall, began to slip tongues of flame. In about 5 minutes, this shooting the lever was turned again. The door is open. From the furnace brought down steam. The voice of the operator was heard. We learned a voice of the doctor appetizingly. He inhaled couple. Patients will be happy. On it record terminated. Sergei with Vasya, who throughout all video gradually turned green, broke in a toilet, and already characteristic sounds reached from there. We with Anton just exchanged glances. We decided to go to bed. At me in the head the thought flashed that the maniac could track down us, but I drove away her. In the morning we woke up safe and sound. However, on Institute late, there was a Monday. We not especially were upset, as our business was more interesting than Institute. Having gathered and having equipped, we moved to hospital. When we began to approach her again, noticed a certain strangeness. On the 3rd floor of hospital, of a window were strange clean as though washed up, light. Having noted about itself it, we got inside. In the hall we noticed snow. It was suspicious. Lumps of snow came across then, there, and resembled traces. We quickly rose by the 3rd floor and moved along the corridor, long metal doors. Having thrown a look in the end of a corridor, I noticed that the door in an office is closed. We approached to the first door and I inserted a key. To our everyone's surprise, the door easily opened, even without the aid of a key. It wasn't locked. We carefully entered. Inside, along a wall, there was an iron plank bed walled and a wall on it. The mattress lay sideways. There was a washstand and a toilet bowl. The splodgy mirror hung. On a metal table there was a plate from the residues of slosh, in which we identified that also what was dropped before a door cooked in a crematorium. We dispersed on the camera, though it also was small. On walls I saw the mass of the strange drawings scratched. Also words resembled. It is more on spells for distillation of evil spirits. Under a window dark fabric which, obviously enclosed it lay. I didn't doubt that it is the camera of that girl, who was afraid of demons. But what for the demon whom she defeated? Under a plank bed the hammer lay. We left the strange room and went to following. That wasn't locked to and surprisingly easily opened. How greased. In this room there was all just the same, as well as in the last camera, except for the blood-stained floor near a bed and traces of the blood-stained palms on walls. The mirror was broken. On his splinters there was blood and rags of fabric. Along a wall there were wide bloody strips. We, without exchanging words, somehow at once understood that there lived a girl who broke off the person. Splinters she cut him, tore apart him, carrying out by him along a wall. Horror. Unexpectedly all of us jumped up when the door of the cell slammed. What for? Anton shouted and pushed a door with a leg. The door didn't open, and we began to panic slowly until I remembered keys and opened a door from within. We left. Was around nobody, but there was also no draft which would close a door. Anton kept a gun in readiness when we opened doors one for another. In all there was the same emptiness, only a stove bench, a table, a toilet bowl, the wash basin, only in one room. The stove bench was walled, not on the right, and at the left in a wall, and I immediately learned the room in which the girl, who was afraid of the flammable palms, hung herself. She hung itself on the pipe which, for some reason, was taking place in chamber from above. We saw in the room of the maniac a mattress was in a corner. Doors were scratched by nails. Obviously, at the time he not bad raged. We reached the last camera, which walls were pasted over with writing book sheets with drawings. It surprised us, and we began to consider them. Simple children's drawings, some silhouettes around the child. Over the child, rolling an inscription, precisely same that girl who saw around herself spirits. I noticed one leaf which drew my attention. I broke it from a wall and began to read. Today, on January 28, 2011, it strongly surprised me. It was today, so you already read this letter. You so record with me, and you know that I won't lie now. If you understood it, then no. We already die. You have to find us. People who died even earlier say to me, everything that you know about this building. Enough. Just be not afraid and take friends in the travel. They will help you. Our souls will calm down as soon as our torturer is punished. It is necessary, I spoke. What? Friends asked me, and I gave them a leaf, gray. Having twisted it in hands, I asked, and what read? What to read? A leaf empty. I picked up him. He was clean, that forced me to be dumbfounded. We left and went to an office. It wasn't locked, but we didn't find the camera in a case means. He was here, Anton told. They began to discuss where the maniac could go and where patients. And I was absorbed by thoughts at this time. This girl knows that I will help her. Therefore, she knows how, everything that you know about the building. What does it mean? To me, only to move most wasn't enough, and we're the security guard. So what do I know about the building? Well, it is constructed in the 80th, closed somewhere in the 95th. Said that the government investigates supernatural abilities of people like those that were at the girl at whom palms, or that lit up, that saw ghosts and thoughts I approach a window. Snow brought down already in flakes, and strange rotated near a window, as though inviting me to look at the street. I looked, and here shook me. I learned this footpath on the street. She was on the last record with the girl who broke off the person. I turned and told about it to friends. They completely supported my invention to go on this track. We had a gun. We quickly got out to the street, bypassed the building, and went on a track. On my nape the hair bristled when I remembered records. Friends were silent too, and went seriously. On a track we went about 15 minutes. Didn't come across a small lodge in the forest yet. From a pipe there was a smoke. We decided to come. In the only room there was a furnace near which the man in a white dressing gown sat. He turned the head to us, and we saw his face. The face of the mad genius with shining eyes and Oskaleni teeth. He so laughed loudly that we ran out on the street, and in horror ran about a minute. Didn't stop yet, and didn't begin to ask each other that it was a reality or a hallucination. When we dared to come to a lodge again, it was empty. On traces from it we passed about 50 more meters and saw some unit, like a power saw bench, all soiled by blood and some rags. Blood, a hot pool, melted snow around her. Vassia pulled out. We with horror looked at this design and were afraid to accept a thought. that several people were lowered in a tray and are cut on pieces, are once again cut then and eventually turned into red slush, which waved in a hole where all this and merged. The crash of Boss forced us to move sharply towards a sound source. It was a doctor. Giggling vaguely, he said in a mocking voice, "Yes, it's me. It was I who asked them to go down there for release, and they went. Hee hee hee. Let's go." One by one, and your mother, and Tosha, who was afraid of demons, and the fortune teller, all went, and your uncle, Basia, and he also wanted. What nonsense! I have no uncle, yelled Vasia, naive boy. Do you really believe that relatives will tell you how your uncle killed all his relatives? Yes. You are named after him, and your mother, he turned to Anton. Do you think she is sinless? Yes. She killed the homeless man with a hammer when he walked along the 3rd floor, and she could kill the one who wandered there the day before yesterday, and we would have prepared a soup from him too. After these words, I felt that something had turned over in my stomach, because it was me who went there, and then I remembered that on the record this woman said that someone was walking behind the door. Lies. I'm not one of these places. Ha ha ha. The psycho rattled. Fool. Do you think you'd be left here? There was a shot that interrupted the madman's speech. Anton fired his gun, but missed. The psycho giggled and said, "Don't try, son. Dad will do it himself." Dad, get lost. Don't you like my joke? Only now everyone paid attention to the smell of gasoline and the wet clothes of a psycho. I thought it would be fun, and he lit a match. The pillar of fire stood calm for some time, but then began to run through the forest, shot and right on the ground. Anton wanted to shoot him, but Vasia lowered his hand. Let him suffer. After a minute, the psycho calmed down and only smoked. We breathed a sigh of relief and, trying not to look at the terrible Uni 10 meters away, turned back. Go back to hell, bitches, came an enraged voice from the aggregate, but no one had time to react except Anton, who caught his gun with lightning speed and fired in the direction of his voice. The bullet ricocheted away from the metal. Sparks flew into the psycho's face, and he, unable to resist, collapsed into the hole, splashing thick blood, flaps, some black marks, hair on the snow near the hole. We rushed to get out of there. This is the story that happened. We were slightly crushed by cops, then let go, even announced gratitude.